What if the future of education was decided and designed by young people? A few months ago, prompted by an invitation to ask what if, as a way to reimagine our education, this question rang in my ears. Something about it felt intuitively right to me and deeply intriguing. I began wondering, could the way to transform education be through tuning to young people's needs and letting them guide the way? After engaging in extensive research and discussing with incredible youth activists and advocates from across the globe, I've come to strongly believe that young people should be leading the necessary process of change, or rather transformation, that our education needs to go through. In these next few minutes, I will share with you why. Before we can agree on the best way to change education, we need to agree on the purpose of education and on a vision for education. It starts by recognizing that education is the human making function of society. So, to reform our vision for education is analogous to reforming our vision for humanity. Education has a core role to play in our necessary planetary transition if we are to have a livable planet for future generations. The way we design our education today will determine the future of our societies tomorrow. By the same logic, the social fractures we're witnessing today, from biodiversity loss to polarization to abject inequalities, are a direct result of the way we have designed our education in the past. These fractures are a byproduct of an education that taught us to ruthlessly compete with one another for notions of personal success over our collective interest. An education that robs us of our natural curiosity and dulls us into becoming cogs dedicated to the good functioning of the economic machine. Our current education systems worldwide are shaped by what is called the reductive human capital theory, meaning that the main function of education systems is to supply the economy with the next generation of workers. It is time we rethink the core purpose of our education and to make it the flourishing of individuals for thriving societies. It is time to be driven by a new vision of our education, a vision that carries us out of civilizational collapse and into a new form of human civilization, capable of taking care of our planet and ourselves. So, how do we get to this vision of education? I believe education needs to go through a metamorphic process, a transformation from the inside out, through young people choosing and demanding new ways to get an education. There are two main reasons I believe a youth led revolution in education is the key element to a potential transformation of education. Firstly, historically, it took people awakening to their rights and demanding them for large systems to truly transform. For instance, the first two large democracies, the USA and France, were movements by the people for the people. They shone a light on the possibility of a new way to govern and be governed, and from there led to a movement of democratization across the globe. I believe that in order to see a genuine transformation of education, we are going to need a similar awakening by the main population education is supposed to serve: young people. Secondly, there is a misalignment between the goal of schooling, the reductive human capital model, and the goal of people and society, individual and societal flourishing. And we need to acknowledge that this misalignment is not about to go away. Therefore, individuals and communities need to reclaim their education by exercising agency. In fact, agency over one's education is a legal right to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC, and it's the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history. So it is time to exercise our rights. On top of that, we need to acknowledge that young people have lost trust in the adults in charge who are so shamelessly mortgaging their futures. As it stands, young people will be spending their lives dealing with the messes created by the generations before them. In a recent speech, Greta Thunberg said, "Why should I be studying for a future that soon may be no more, when no one is doing anything to save that future? And what is the point of learning facts when the most important facts clearly mean nothing to our society? If you still say that we are wasting valuable lesson time, then let me remind you, our political leaders have wasted decades through denial and inaction." Greta and all the young people she inspired are not missing learning time by protesting on Fridays. They're learning much more by getting engaged in civic life and demanding more from their governments. one of the most prominent figures of education, John Dewey, once said, "I believe that the only true education comes through the stimulation of the child's power by the demands of the social situations in which he finds himself." And that is exactly what these young people are doing. They are getting a true education, one that will surely serve them in the coming decades as we navigate the existential threats ahead of us. Finally, I want to impress upon you that the time for this radical transformation, led by young people, is now. In his recent TED Talk, climate impact scholar Johan Rockström made painfully clear that we only have 10 years to transition the whole world to a new logic of modern prosperity and equity within planetary boundaries. It is our coexisting generation's role in this very peculiar time in human history to enable a planetary transition to a sustainable and resilient civilization that embraces collaboration and collective well-being over competition and individualism. And as disastrous as the consequences of COVID-19 have been, it has also opened a unique opportunity for us to push the transformation agenda for education. A transformation agenda that has been left on the bench decade after decade. The time is now. So, if you're resonating with this message and would like to be part of a global movement to reclaim our education, and with it, our humanity, join us and support the Youth by Youth movement by visiting us online at YouthxYouth.com. Also, give your kid the agency they crave to flourish. Include young people in policymaking and in any decision that is likely to impact their futures. Thank you.